Thank you. What is this bird? The chipping sparrow. The chipping sparrow, which is bird number 20, and that's where we left off. All right. This is not a new bird. It's the last bird we went over. This is the next new bird, bird 21. Bird 21. Yes, these birds should not all look like pigeons to you. If they do all look like pigeons, the more you practice, the less you'll think that way. I hope. This bird is called the dark-eyed junco. Dark-eyed is hyphenated. Dark-eyed, and you can kind of see why it would be called dark-eyed. And then junco is Junco. There's no K, even though we say junk. Dark-eyed junco. Dark-eyed junco. Not a super common bird that you will find around here, but we've seen them on campus, like all 30 of these first birds we're learning. And I would say, and this is not terribly distinct, but this top half slate gray, bottom half white is about as good of a diagnostic feature as you're going to get. Now it does have a big round dark eye, as its name tells us, but again, eye color, that's not exactly something that in the field, through the binoculars, in a tree branch, you're going to identify the bird by. You're not going to really be looking for eye color. So the top half slate gray, bottom half white. Now Mr. Kinney can do the junco call, can't you?
I can, but it's really high frequency. I'm doing it right now. So have y'all done the app installation?
We will start with the app installation, but join me on camera for my recorded lecture.
Where's the camera? Hi. I can't get enough camera time.
Good, yeah. Oh, I know. In a year like this, just screen time is so lacking.
Well, hey, I'm just giving a test over here, so when an installation comes, if you need help.
I think we'll be okay. Thank you, John. All right. Next bird. Bird number 22. This one does not look like a pigeon. What does it remind you of? It reminds you of a woodpecker because it's the downy woodpecker. See, y'all are picking this up. That's the first step, is to just know what general kind of bird it is, then you can whittle it down to a more specific type. Now, for a woodpecker, these are little guys. They're not that big. I don't really know where, I mean, I can guess, but the name Downy, D-O-W-N-Y, Downy obviously means like a feathery, soft appearance. And I guess they would have that, but not necessarily anything too much different from any other bird. The spotted pattern on the back is pretty evident. And the males have this red spot on the back of their head. The females do not. Now at this point, I am certainly not terribly interested in male versus female. I mean, with the cardinals, it's pretty easy to tell, so that's one thing. We saw this, I don't think in this class, but in another class the other day on the trail to the Dar farm. And one thing about woodpeckers is that you do tend to find them like climbing up the tree trunk. They usually don't sit at the end of a branch. I mean, you'll find them walk out to the end of a branch, but they're not going to be flying from branch to branch and hopping around like some of these birds do. Usually, you can kind of scan a tree trunk and find them just kind of climbing up the tree or down. And that's a fairly woodpecker-like behavior. The downy woodpecker. Downy woodpecker. All right, the next bird.
A peacock.
This is bird 23. It is not a peacock.
It is a peacock.
It is a European starling. A European starling.
Caroline, is it pigeon? Is it pigeon?
Now, when you look at this bird, what stands out?
The yellow.
The
Purple
peacockness.
and blue and
It's
green
shiny.
colors.
The iridescent, colorful body, design. But I will say this about the starling. To see its full colors like this, sometimes you have to have the sun kind of hitting just right. The lighting is an issue with this bird. A lot of times, without good lighting, it actually looks fairly black, like a dark colored bird that doesn't have much variety of color to it. And then as you look at it for a little while, it might turn or move in a way, and the light will hit it in a different angle, and you'll see some of this iridescence, almost a metallic colorfulness to it. And it's fairly large. But sometimes people will be like, oh, I think that's a crow. And then you look at it just for a second or two longer, and you start seeing some of the iridescence, some of the shininess to it, and the color. And that's when you can identify it as a European starling, which typically we would just say starling.
Yes.
I don't know that anybody will have trouble spelling European starling, but I can help with that. All right, the next bird. So this is bird 24. Just want to make sure our numbers are correct. This is the American goldfinch. And goldfinch is one word. American goldfinch. What is something that stands out to you about this bird?
The yellow.
Yeah, it's a gold-colored bird. Now, what do you think the difference between this guy and these two are?
Male and female.
It's male and female. The females are definitely less gold. And I'll be honest with you, probably around this time of year, the males aren't quite as golden as you may see in this picture. In the spring, though, once the males have their full color coming in, the yellow is a bright yellow. It looks unnaturally yellow. Sometimes you'll see something fly by, and it will have like a highlighter yellow color to it, and those are the males kind of in their full color. But, not a lot of birds, some, but not a lot of birds really have much yellow to them in this region. And to distinguish these from any other birds that have yellow, they usually do have kind of this black wing with the white bar. So you can see kind of black wing, white bar, with at least a yellow tint to much of the rest of the body. Also, and this will come into play towards the end of some of the birds we talk about today, the finch, or at least the finches in this area, a lot of them have this kind of thick, pointy beak. This is a very good seed nut cracking beak. So yellow with a black wing and a white bar or markings on that black wing. The American goldfinch. All right, moving on. Bird number 25. Right? You're on number 25? Good. Now, I'm not going to say that this is my favorite bird, but this bird, I think it makes me happier when I see it than any other bird around here. We usually only see it near Christmas time. I'm not saying they aren't around, but that's typically when I start noticing the cedar waxwing. Cedar waxwing. So cedar like a cedar tree, C-E-D-A-R. And then the second name is one word, waxwing together. Cedar waxwing. Now, the reason we went with this picture is because they do typically like to eat these red berries that you can find and that persist into the winter. So there are a few trees and some bushes around that even in the winter they keep their red berries. Mm-hmm. And so we'll typically only find them like on trees and bushes like that. And I don't know how migratory they are, but it does seem like they show up in the colder months, and usually around Christmas. So I see this bird, it's kind of like this, the leaves have all fallen, you got cold weather, Christmas time is close by, and the cedar waxwings start showing up. And it's a nice warm feeling, you know? There are unfortunately some popular landscaping plants, and I'm blanking on the name right now of what the plant is called. But there's a popular landscaping plant that has red berries that actually poison the cedar waxwings. Like the holly bushes you see a lot do not. But, Nandina, I think is the technical name for the landscaping plant that used to be used a lot more. And then we discovered that when the cedar waxwings ate those red berries, they actually were poisoned and sometimes killed by them. But a little bit of a bigger bird. This is not a tiny bird. It's got this fun little tuft that is sometimes slicked back and sometimes raised a little. But this black face mask is definitely kind of your best marker, best feature, besides just the general kind of slickness of the body design. I mean, I wouldn't talk about like kind of, this brown to gray. I mean, and it doesn't really stand out as that diagnostic of a feature. There are some smaller markings like this yellow tip on the tail feathers and red tip on the wings, or red spot on the wings. But again, those aren't nearly as identifiable as the general like tuft with black mask. A nice seasonal bird for this area, the cedar waxwing. All right, bird 26. If you play baseball, you've probably seen or heard one of these birds because they like to nest in gravelly areas, and that gravel parking lot across the street is a spot where we see them pretty much every year. This is the killdeer. One word, kill and deer. Killdeer.
Killdeer.
Killdeer. The killdeer. A few really unique things about the killdeer, and hopefully we'll get to see them. And like I said, sometimes they really congregate around the baseball field, football practice fields across the street. That's about the only place you'll see them on campus. The name does not have anything to do with killing deer. This is one of those names that you get because of the sound they make. It kind of sounds like they're saying kill deer, so that's the name people have given them. They are pretty much a ground-dwelling bird. We're not going to point up at the sky and see a flock of birds and say that's a flock of killdeer. That's not where you see them. So usually where we will see them on campus is walking around like a gravelly area. They nest right on the ground in a little pit they make out of the gravelly substrate. And their eggs look like little rocks. It's actually hard to see the eggs when they're sitting in this nest. They have, to me, what's kind of like a seagull cry that they make. So sometimes you'll hear a sound and you'll be like, that kind of sounds like a bird I would hear on the beach. But it's here in Rome, Georgia. And I'm no good at bird calls, so we can listen to the sounds. Probably on the app. I think your app has bird songs on it once we download it. A lot of times if you get close to the nest, the mother will like drop her wing and kind of act like she's limping away from the nest when she's concerned. Why is she doing that?
To draw your attention.
To draw you away from the eggs and from her nest. She acts hurt, hoping a predator will start focusing on her, and then as the predator comes up, she'll fly off and just kind of lead them away from the nest. We have found killdeer nests out in the baseball parking lot. In terms of looking at the features, the physical features of this bird, you know, you got these long legs, and they're bigger birds. This is going to be a big bird, not a big bird, but a larger bird walking on the ground with kind of a shrill, piercing call, like it's whining or crying about something. And of course, things like, you know, kind of this black ring around the neck and breast can help you identify it. But this is one of the few birds where, just based on where it is, you can usually give a pretty good, get a pretty good identification on it. The killdeer. All right. We've had a similar bird like this before. This is bird 27. So we're getting very close to the end of the list here. This is for bird 27, this is the brown-headed, that's a hyphenated part to the name, brown-headed nuthatch. The brown-headed nuthatch. Brown-headed nuthatch. What was the other nuthatch we had?
I don't know.
The white-breasted nuthatch, which with at least one class I saw the other day. The brown-headed nuthatch, again, you tend to find them walking straight up or straight down a tree. Not so much just hanging out on a branch, but kind of walking up and down the trunk. Obviously, brown-headed nuthatch because of this brown top half to the head. They have a little bit more of a needle-like beak, this thin, longer, pointed beak. Not terribly long, but for this pretty small bird it is. And so those are going to be kind of your diagnostic features. How it's walking along a tree, and the brown head. Also, its call sounds a lot like a dog chewing on a squeaky toy. So you hear that like kind of call. You'll hear like a sound that you could imagine being a squeaky toy being chewed by a dog, and that's what its bird call is like. So I usually hear these much more than I actually end up seeing them. All right. Next bird. Bird number 28. Some of you may actually know what this bird is since it's the state bird of Georgia.
Brown thrasher.
It's a brown thrasher. That's right. Brown, and then the second, it's not hyphenated, it's two separate words. Brown, and then thrasher. I don't know if any of you are hockey fans, but years ago, the city of Atlanta had an NHL team called the Atlanta Thrashers. And it's because it's our state bird. It's, in terms of size and kind of beak shape and all, it's kind of like a mockingbird. But it doesn't look like one in terms of coloration or pattern. But you have a brown bird, like the mockingbird, kind of a longer, more prominent beak and longer, more prominent tail feathers. But to me, the kind of key identification feature is this speckled breast. It's not really polka dotted, but I would call this more speckling, where you have kind of spots and blotches of darker color all along the front of the bird. The brown thrasher.
For their quiz, are you going to use those pictures?
Whenever we have the bird quiz, and it will not be this week, we're going to work on learning these and practicing with our app. I will not necessarily use the exact picture. I will try to use I will use pictures that feature the identifying features that we discuss. The problem is that one thing I learned years ago is that if you use the exact same pictures, people start doing things like, oh yeah, the cedar waxwing is the one with the red berries in it. And you start memorizing things that aren't even like the bird. The brown thrasher.
Is it going to be next week? Or after Thanksgiving?
We might have the bird quiz next week,
I'm not ready.
but I'm kind of getting that was my initial plan, was to get a bird quiz in before Thanksgiving. But honestly, we might just make that kind of like the big grade between Thanksgiving and Christmas. We'll have kind of a big bird quiz, somewhere in the middle of that time between Thanksgiving and Christmas. If that's what y'all prefer, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, it might have all 50 birds on it.
No.
Maybe not all 50, maybe.
But we'll see. It doesn't take, I know when you first start seeing birds, if you haven't done any birding or bird watching in the past, you start to get a little overwhelmed at some of the number of pictures and different names. But once we practice this for, a couple of weeks, people get pretty darn good at identifying, if you bother to try it all. All right, bird 29, right? Okay, this is bird 29. It is the house finch. 2 words, house finch. Pretty simple name. I'll go ahead and tell you, I will never make you identify a female house finch. Because that's a pretty bland and boring bird right there. And for me, I almost just have to look at the beak and go, okay, that's a finch, so it's probably a female house finch. I mean, there are some markings that you might be able to see in there that make it stand out. The males are pretty easy because of this like red stain. And it's not something you're going to confuse with a cardinal. I mean, the cardinal has kind of the black face mask and the tuft, whereas the finch does not. That is a very finchy beak right there, by the way. That short, thick, seed-crushing beak. So, you know, the red stain on the head and breast will tell you it's a male house finch, and as long as you can identify the males, I'm happy.
So we don't have to worry about the female?
And I'm not going to worry about the female house finch. I mean, when we're out and about, we'll probably see some, and, you know, I'll try to point out, like, look at the beak. You see how, because this is very sparrow-like in its appearance. And a lot of times these birds, you'll see a couple different species of bird all foraging on the ground, and you'll have sparrows mixed in with these females. You'll be like, oh, what is that? What is that? But the males are easy enough. Okay, and then to finish Series 1, the first of your 30 birdie, this is the Eastern Phoebe. Now, Phoebe, make sure I spell it correctly for you. It's going to be P-H-O-E-B-E. Phoebe. Phoebe. But we just say Phoebe. So this is the Eastern Phoebe. Now, it looks pretty bland. There's not beautiful colors in this bird or anything. But this kind of, and I don't want to call it like black, it's like a charcoal head. It's pretty distinct. They're also not that big, but a lot of times they're very active. One class, there was one on a magnolia tree the other day when we were out. And it was kind of hard to identify it because it wouldn't stop moving for long enough because it was hopping around and fluttering and landing and fluttering and landing and hopping around. But once it stayed still for a minute, you could pretty clearly see this kind of charcoal head that's darker than the rest of the body. And that's about as good as I can do for you. I mean, I know for any of these birds, you could stare at a picture and, given some time, describe things like, you know, these lighter colored lines that run parallel to the wing. But you're just not going to really notice a lot of that when you're out in the field and you have 3.5 seconds maximum before the bird flies off or moves. So that charcoal head and kind of the dainty beak and the fact that it's a little smaller than some of the other birds we talk about. Like you might think to yourself, well, that dark-eyed junco that we started today with, it's kind of gray and lighter color. And yeah, but the junco is going to be kind of a bigger, plumper bird. And it's not going to be just the head that has that charcoal color to it. So, that is the conclusion of birds 1 through 30. 1 through 30. The Eastern Phoebe should be your 30th bird on your list. We need to learn them, and I guarantee you a quiz that involves these 30. That's kind of the first step to all of this. So, what we're going to do now, and then I'm going to stop the video, we are going to download an app onto our phones called Merlin. M-E-R-L-I-N. And when you look up Merlin, you'll see something added to it where it will, generate up on the list is like Merlin, Bird ID, and then something about Cornell University. So we're going to download that now, and when it's all downloaded, I'll explain where we'll go from there. And Lambert, if you could stop the video there. Thank you.